Hi, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. I am so sorry for the delay. We were working on some technical issues, and Elizabeth from Mystery to Me is on the back end kind of working out some stuff so that we can get Gary here so he can talk to you about his book. So thank you so much for being patient, sticking with us. I have Kevin here to chat a little bit about his upcoming book to get this started. And before we do all of that, I'm going to hop into our typical housekeeping stuff that we always do at the beginning of these. We have quite a few
Oh my God.
names.
Sweet Jesus. Wait, why is my camera not on though?
This is excellent timing.
Oh my God.
Anytime is
It's
better.
crazy.
Welcome, Gary. There you are. You're a little bit, we're catching up to your audio a little bit here. We can a little bit, but it's breaking up. Maybe it needs to catch up a little bit. Try something now, Gary. It's really breaking up for us. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna try something different here, Gary. Maybe we can remove you and end you back. Sorry, everybody, for some technical difficulties here. We want to make sure that you can hear everybody and hear the conversation as it's unfolding. I'm going to do our little intro here, and then I'm going to get started with the bios for Gary and Kevin. But as always, we're really happy to have you. We have a lot of familiar faces in the crowd today, so thank you for coming back. This is a series that is dedicated to showcasing our Soho crime authors, putting them in conversation with other Soho crime authors to talk about their new releases. We have 2 books to speak about today. But as always, we're going to do a little Q&A at the end of the event. So if you want to ask a question to Gary or Kevin, you can put them in either the chat, which you have already been working in today, or in the Q&A box, which is on the right side of your screen immediately under the chat function. You should be able to see that, and we'll field as many of those as we can near the end of the event. Finally, our next event will be a special preview event of Jasper Ford's Thursday Next series, Dark Reading Matter. It's the last installment of that series, and that will take place on September 2nd at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'd love to have you join us for that. SohoCrimeLineup.com is where you can get registered. Looks like Gary's working on his on getting back here, but I'm going to introduce you to Kevin, who is with us right now. Kevin Jagernauth was born in Ottawa and currently resides in Montreal. He is a freelance film critic and has covered festivals around the world, including Cannes, Berlinale, and TIFF for The Film Verdict, Ion Cinema, and The Playlist. He also works as a script coverage consultant for feature-length screenplays. The Longest Death is his first novel, and it's available in the States on December 1st. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for dealing with our technical difficulties this afternoon.
That's all right.
So I want to get started, maybe before Gary jumps back up here. This is your debut novel. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about it and also why you decided that this story would be your first?
Sure. So I guess the basic crux of the narrative is it's a noir set in the late 40s about 2 men, an office worker named Richard and a con artist named Marlon, who fall in love in this small town and decide to commit a heist to move to a big city where they can live together, sort of out of the attention that a small town brings, especially to a queer couple of that time. I've always been a big fan of noir fiction, of noir cinema, and I wanted to write a story. Well, I thought if I was going to write a story in that milieu in 2026 or 3 or whenever I started this book, I wanted to do something that updated the genre a bit and maybe provided a different perspective rather than just working through the same tropes. So traditionally in noir fiction and in noir cinema, queer characters have usually been marginalized or othered, and they don't really have the agency in their own story. And so that was sort of the genesis for this, was to bring those characters to the center, make them as complicated and interesting as any other character in any other noir story, and build a novel that way.
That's great. I have some questions for you about the setting because it is very specific. We can get to those later. Lisa asked, please repeat the name of Kevin's new novel. It's called The Longest Death. It has a really wonderful picture of Nighthawks on the cover, which I love. Gary, are you with us here? Okay, we will try again when he comes back. Let's talk about it now then. So The Longest Death. Oh,
there he is.
There he is. Can you hear us, Gary?
Yes.
Perfect. It might honestly be better to leave your video off. It seems like we can hear you better.
Okay.
Gary, thank you for being a champion. I'm so sorry. This is giving you so much trouble today.
No, I'm sorry.
We're glad that you're here with us, though. So thank you for sticking it out. I want to repeat this question that I asked Kevin back to you, although of course,
thanks for having me.
The Hall is not your first novel, but I would love to have you give sort of an overview of what The Hall is about. Can you hear us, Gary?
The Hall is about a character named who I've written about. I've written him as a featured player in a couple of other incarnations, but in this particular version, he's sort of semi-retired, and he comes out of that lull in his criminal career. That's when the thieves are going to strike.
That's perfect. I'm going to ask you some more questions about him because we do see him in a few of your pieces before The Hall, but we're gonna get there. Also, Gary, I think if you turn your video off, I think the sound might be a little bit better for us. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for showing us your face. Joy of these virtual events, right? Whose idea was it to start a digital event series? I don't know. Gary, since we have you with us, let's talk about O'Connor. He appeared for the first time in your 2012 novel, Warlord of Willow Ridge, and then again in the story collection that you co-authored. What has kept you revisiting him? Like, why bring him back now?
Oh, I think that's a great, question there, Lee. I think it's always something about the anti-hero. This guy who, in this case, is, as I said, sort of wants to challenge himself, wants to go up against the odds. And I think in particular, though, like a lot of crime writers, certainly crime writers of my age and my era, we were influenced by the Stark, Westlake writing as Stark, the Parker novels, which he started writing in the early fictional thief, amoral character in an amoral world. So I think that's what's kind of kept me back. So to a degree, O'Connor is an amoral character, but also to a degree, there are shades of difference in terms of rounding him out, or at least for me, in terms of rounding him out. So that's why in this book there are flashbacks to the late '90s when he's a kid. I mean, he's 13 or 14, growing up. He's an orphan, growing up in a group home in South Central. But in particular, that one specific night happens early on in the book, and a lot of our characters who will come into play then and later, are introduced on the stage. The idea being that when O'Connor gets a call. By the way, O'Connor is living a middle class, middle age, not necessarily suburban, but he lives in a well-to-do subdivision, playing couples pickleball. But when he gets the call, he's motivated to go back in action.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this is a phenomenon I feel like we see authors revisiting and kind of expanding upon the stories that they have written for characters in the past. And so it's cool to see inside Soho, we kind of refer to this as like the Gary verse that you're building a little bit. You have a lot of characters that sort of come in and out of your novels, which is a rewarding experience for those who have read multiple of them. So I want to ask, I want to open. Oh, go on. Yeah, what were you going to say?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
I'll turn off my video again, but the video came back on. I'll turn it back off.
It did, yeah. I think, yeah, it feels a little, I feel like you're a little bit more, like, we hear you a little bit better when the video's off.
Yeah, when I'm not all max headroom, yeah.
Right. I want to talk to both of you. I have a question for both of you. So field this as you'd like, but this is obviously an event we're calling Summer of the Heist. We have the honor of publishing quite a few heist stories this summer, but it seems like beyond just Soho's catalog, heist stories are everywhere, which feels appropriate for a time where we're seeing greater and greater wealth inequalities, when we're welcoming, or maybe not so welcoming, the first trillionaire ever this summer. Why do you think readers have an increased appetite for heist stories in 2026? And what drew you each to write about a heist?
Well, I think for a reader, it's kind of nice to read about something that maybe you've thought about how you might do it, but obviously without having to do it. And so you have that sort of you're able to sort of navigate a situation that you've seen in a movie, or maybe you've even had the passing thought of, well, if I had to rob a bank or something, how would I do this? In terms of telling the story, for me, Gary just mentioned, sort of amoral characters in an amoral world. Having characters that that sort of go down this road already is the first step towards them taking further sort of amoral action. So if they're already planning to rob something, then it follows that maybe they would hurt someone. Then it follows that maybe they would kill someone. You can see the sort of moral gradations. You can see that moral layers sort of fall away as a heist unfolds, or as that planning unfolds. At least for me, in terms of telling the story and building the characters.
Gary, what about you?
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, I as a reader of this genre, take a great pleasure vicariously, as Kevin suggested, in writing a character like O'Connor, who's got he's got ice in his veins, and he's got nerves of steel and all that. Not that he doesn't sometimes get set back, and part of the complications of a heist story is, of course, something has to go wrong or something goes sideways, because otherwise, then if you just pull off the heist, and you just pull off the heist. So the idea being that I'm still interested in putting this kind of character under pressure, right? To see which way he jumps. And for me, I think because I was, I could take a few glimpses of him as the boy who becomes the man. We get a sense of, even though we of course skip over a lot of those years, but we still get a sense of what that journey that took O'Connor to be who he is now. And again, the idea that to sort of your broader question earlier, listen, you're right. I mean, here we are in the land of, or in the world of billionaires and people racing to get to Mars and leave us poor schlubs behind here on Earth to fend for ourselves and what have you. So yes, the idea being that, a guy like the thieves we've written about can get back at the big guy, at the fat cats, can strike a blow, even if they wouldn't say they were striking a blow for the working class. Although one of the characters in the book in the hall says, essentially says this, but the idea being that so we can get a kind of thrill from what they do, and the idea being that listen, you can't take it with you, so you might as well spend it now.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Gary's saying, in my book, there's a moment when Marlon sort of justifies what they're doing just by saying, there's a moment of doubt about whether they'll do this heist, and he's like, well, America was founded on theft and violence, and he feels no compunction about it. And I think that sort of feeds into this moment where I feel there's also this moral, I don't know, miasma maybe that there's a lot of lack of sympathy, I suppose, floating around. And so, yeah, that's I guess my book feeds into that moment a little bit in that regard.
Gary, I liked what you said about putting these characters under pressure and seeing which way they jump. Did either of you suspect how your characters would react to the pressure that you apply in the novels? Did you kind of know, or was that purely something that you found as you were writing?
Well, I'll just say for me, having written O'Connor before, and then I've also done a couple of short stories with the character. I certainly had some notion of how I thought he would react. O'Connor, he's a plotter and a planner, and he's. I like to say that he plays, Spock chess. You know what I mean? 3-dimensional chess, and of course he tries to be 3 or 4 steps ahead. And of course, then when the rug gets pulled out from under him, like anybody, he is taken aback, and he's caught flat-footed. So then the idea being, well, then what does he do to adjust? How does he, if, the analogy, I guess the analogy for me is being a boxing fan is, when you're on the ropes and you've had the strategy going into the ring, and then all of a sudden your opponent is fighting in a different method, or is adjusting to your adjustments. Well, then what do? How do you outthink them? How do you out strategize them? So I thought, yeah, the idea being that it would be fun to let's see how he ticks, and understanding that in the end, O'Connor he isn't much about anything, but he is loyal to the crew. And so if the crew is down, then he's down, and then if you come after him, then he's got to figure out how do I neutralize that problem.
Yeah, and for Marlon and Richard in my novel, I mean, their loyalties to each other. The whole thing that's powering their motivations behind the heist is their relationship. So, um, as long as that relationship keeps steady, those hesitations about what they're going to do keep getting knocked back. Because at the core of it, they're doing it for each other, for their life and what they want to move on to. They're chasing a dream. I mean, they're chasing an illusion of a happy ending. And sometimes, at least in this story, that lure of uh, of sort of a happy ever after and having all these riches and being able to punch your own ticket is the whole motivation for them pushing along.
I'm glad you brought up their relationship, Kevin, because I wanted to ask you about that.
Mm.
this is a crime story, right? But it's also a love story. And so I'm curious why you combined both of them in one narrative, and do you think it's more one than the other?
That's a great question. Actually, when I finished one of the earlier drafts, I gave it to a friend of mine to read, and he asked me, like, do you want me to like give you like actual edits or just ask you questions? And I said, no, no, just ask me questions. And the first one he asked was, is this a love story or a crime story? And that was very illuminating because I realized I had written a love story with a crime story built around it. So I would say it's definitely both. I think for anyone who wants to read a noir heist story, they're going to get a noir heist story. But at its center is a love story, and maybe it speaks to my sense of both romanticism and fatalism. But I think it was nice to have stakes just beyond something almost intangible beyond just dollars and cents. I didn't like to me the Maltese Falcon. Yeah, it's about the Falcon, but as they say in the movie adaptation, it's not in the book. It's the stuff that dreams are made of, and the idea of chasing something that in the end is a phantom uh, really appealed to me. And I guess love can sometimes feel like that infatuation, that desire for somebody can be as phantasmagorical and unreal as trying to stick up a place and get like $1,000 or $2,000, so or $100,000, whatever it is. So yeah, I think that was the kind of why I decided to put a love story into this narrative.
I love what you said about these, stakes more than just the money, or
Hmm.
whatever is being heisted, because that's so true. And I think all of our favorite stories that follow this, um, costume, like have something else. It's always about something else. I think The Longest Death does that really, really well.
Exactly.
Um, and I guess sort of in this vein, Gary, I'm curious, more often than not, the grifts are the same, in stories like this, whether they're being perpetrated by people in power or people like O'Connor, who is physically getting his hands dirty. It's all about money and the power to exist outside the law. Maybe there's something else in there. But there seems to be a fatigue with villains who are hands off, as opposed to your character, and the
Mm.
characters in Kevin's book who are more hands on and who are like actually doing it themselves. Is this something that you have noticed? And if so, why do you think that is?
That's a Yeah, that's a interesting question. I think you know what it is for me. I think it's a variation on the. I learned long ago from a wise man that the detective has to earn the mystery, right? That you can't just have somebody show up. What is it, Davis Ex Machina? The machine, and all of a sudden tell you the thing that you didn't know,
Mm.
so that they got to be out there. Was it shoe leather? Wasting that, exhausting that shoe leather. So taking that and warping it a little bit, but I think the criminal, the master criminal, has to earn the score. I guess maybe that's the way to subvert it, but to say it in a different way, which is to say, yeah, O'Connor is the mastermind, but I was very important that, and I acknowledge this in the back of the book. I acknowledge the Westlake Parker books, and I acknowledge David McCrummy, the master safecracker, whose story I heard when he was hired to crack Prince's safe on This American Life. And man, it's just yes, the idea being that O'Connor has to have a certain level of skill that he has to be able to bring to the table beyond just being able to plot the thing and plan the thing and just have him sit back. That will be, I agree. It's not, you're not compelled and you don't follow that kind of character. Where I think, yeah, your characters have got to get their hands dirty. they've got to be the ones that backed up in the corner. They have to be the ones that, for good and for ill, make a decision. Jump this way, jump that way, but you got to jump. You can't have somebody else do it for you. So yeah, the more you put your characters on the spot, the more you set them through the paces. So much the better. I think because for me as a reader, as I said, I think it pulls me in. And I'll just say, I mean, because I've been reading Kevin's book, the idea being that he also kind of, subverts that noir, those noir tropes, because here you have the two men enamored of each other, and yet we have this other character, this woman character, who in the Robert Mitchum movie would have been the femme fatale, but now has this kind of other interesting role. And so I think the more you can always play with those tropes, the more you can fool with them and hopefully compel the reader to keep going, because they haven't seen that before. They haven't seen that version before. So much the better.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Kevin, did you have anything to add on there?
Yeah, I mean, actually, no, I don't. I mean,
That was
Gary's
really
so
well said.
eloquent. I mean, what am I going to say, after that?
Yeah,
It was such
really
a
said.
lovely answer. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think he's right. Like the thing that really stuck is, yeah, the detective he has to do the work in these kind of stories, and conversely, the characters have to do the work. And I think that, or the people committing the heist have to do the work. And if they're not, like if you are, yeah, and I think, yeah, I think that's it. That's the crux of it, really.
it's unfair to ask you to have to expound on a Gary answer.
I
They're
know,
usually
that's
very
really
well.
not nice.
Yeah, so that's my bad. That's on me, and I'm sorry about that. We have talked about anti-heroes a little bit today, because you can't talk about heist stories without speaking about anti-heroes. I would say O'Connor, Richard, and Marlon all fall into this category in various ways. Are there any anti-heroes that inspired your characters? And we've, talked about kind of like why we're so interested in morally gray characters, but like just I want to bring this conversation up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so my background is, as you mentioned at the beginning, I've been a film critic for a long time, and even before that, I was just like a sort of ravenous cinephile, like watching everything up and down. And so, for this novel in particular, film noir, like the films were very influential. I've read Dashiell Hammett and Chester Himes and those authors too, and the legends. So I'm not just downplaying that at all. But like, for example, one film that I think was very important to this novel is They Live by Night, Nicholas Ray, which is there's a similarity in the sense it's about a couple who in the after this it's a bit different because a heist occurs at the beginning of the film, and then the aftermath is this young couple falling in love and evading the law, like all at the same time. um but Nicholas Ray, the filmmaker, even though people have died and they've committed this horrible crime, you feel this deep sympathy for this couple. There's a whole sequence where it's around Christmas and they go and hide out in a cabin and become domestic and have a Christmas tree and hang out, and it's really beautiful. But they're criminals, like they've committed crime and they've done the thing, and so those are the sort of anti-heroes I am drawn toward. Those whose moral barometer is clearly broken, but still have some belief in themselves that they're answering to a higher calling, which is usually their own desires. Um, so in that sense, that's what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to those sort of characters who aren't just amoral for the sense of being like villainous or bad, but because they believe that their code supersedes like what we all live by.
You, you know, Kevin name checked two of the writers who I would cite. Hammett and Chester Himes. Hammett's Spade. Spade says in the Maltese Falcon. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of, don't think I'm as crooked as I make out to be. Sometimes that's good for business or something like that. But really, his other character, who he wrote more stories about, the Continental Op, the unnamed character, was really a ruthless, conniving operative who, set. The classic is in Red Harvest, where he sets the two factions, the gangster faction and the gangsters in the suites and the gangsters in the streets. He sets those two factions against each other in a way to hopefully they will wipe out each other, or at least diminish their ranks, and he's able to then help clean up the town. And the op was described as a kind of unassuming looking guy, balding, slightly paunchy, kind of middle age, and so a guy you would never think would have those such amoral inclinations swirling in his head, and yet he did, and he acts upon them. And even Coffin Ed Johnson and Gravedigger Jones in the Himes books are something of a law unto themselves, in the sense of how they dispense justice, how they operate mostly in Harlem, or at least Harlem as Himes imagined Harlem to be, since he never really spent a lot of time there. But the idea being that your characters have a certain amount of, as Kevin said, somewhere in there may be a code. I certainly think Spade has a code. I'm not clear if the op ever really had a code, other than being just ruthlessly efficient in wanting to get the job done, and however he saw getting the job done. Because we never both those characters, I guess, we never really learned much about their upbringing or their life away from work. And so they are defined. They are existentialists in that regard. And then now this brings me back real quickly to Westlake, to Parker. Parker, there's very um, interior landscape revealed about Parker. Now and then there is, but not much. And he is certainly a creature of the id. He is certainly defined almost purely by his actions. And so it is kind of interesting to sort of be influenced or kind of operating with those folks, those characters in and around you, or Bridget O'Shaughnessy in the Maltese Falcon, in her ways, and what have you. So the idea being that in all this sea, for me, I guess I've set O'Connor on his own particular boat, and I suppose, I mean, like I said, I think for him, the money doesn't matter anymore. But I suppose if he had to define what he wanted, I suppose he would want to go out in a blaze, as they say. I don't think he would. I don't think under the umbrella drinking a Mai Tai is his idea of retirement.
It's interesting to break it down and talk about kind of like why we're drawn to these characters and these stories. And
well, I think it goes back, like the anti-hero also, it kind of goes back to your question about why a heist. I think a lot of, like, sometimes they're also acting in ways that we could be, like, tougher, confident. That in a lot of these stories and novels, they have a very strong sense of self, of who they are and how they move through the worlds, even if that world as anti-heroes is also like filled with crooked cops and people on the take and all of that. They have a very commanding view of how they do things and how they want them resolved. And I think there is a pleasure in that. There is a vicariousness to be like, yeah, like I wish I could, you know, be that tough and have that much sort of clarity about how I would meet any sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears here a little bit, but this is a good time to remind everybody, if you have questions for Gary or Kevin, feel free to put them in the chat. There's also a Q&A bubble right below the chat on the right side of your screen, and I'll be grabbing those in a minute, so put them in there if you've got them. But I want to talk about setting for each of your books, because Gary, yours is sort of a departure. Most of your books are your recent work has been set in Los Angeles of the past, but The Hall is set in the 2020s. So can you tell us why you made that decision, and were there any unexpected challenges or opportunities with setting a book so recently?
It's a great question, Lily, because now I've sort of talked about this in some other outings, which is to say, uh, I'm an LA native, right? So I was, I grew up in South Central and all that sort of stuff, and I was a community organizer and what have you, and et cetera, et cetera. And but I'm aware when I'm it's so funny because you're right. You said like in the Harry books, Harry Ingram, the crime photographer, those books are set in the '60s, and so I have research material and what have you, and then I can sort of look at that. So now setting a book essentially now, 2026, I'm aware that I have certain ideas about certain areas of Los Angeles, but that sometimes those ideas or those memories are a bit in amber, which is to say those places have changed now, and so sometimes when I am writing about a particular area of LA or the South, in particular the Greater Southland, I have to maybe go out and see that place, go out and hang out a little bit, or talk to somebody who actually knows the area, so that I'm not, because I certainly recall reading some books, particularly I guess certainly in the going into the 80s and 90s, where the old school crime writers were writing about New York City or Chicago, but they were writing but they were, they had aged. They themselves were getting older, and so the city they were writing about, you could tell, was 20 years out of date. Was not accurate. It didn't reflect what that city is or what those parts of town are now. So I'm very cognizant that even though I'm a native, it's clear to me that I can't take for granted when I write a scene set in Glassell Park, or I write a scene set in Long Beach, that I know what I'm talking about, because if I'm just calling on memory from the past, then there's a tendency to then be, of course, be inaccurate, and you do want to get a sense of the now. You want to get a sense of how things are operating at this moment, and sort of to Kevin's point, which is to say, and then how your character then is going to navigate, those that terrain.
Gary, I'm gonna have a question for you because I've started reading your book as well. Did you? Yeah. What's the interest in like the doomsday bunkers? Where did that come from?
Well, that's on the real, man. That's a great cottage industry, man.
Yeah.
They're oh yeah, because and by the way, it's just to real talk about that real quick. So not only do because didn't I think it was Zuckerberg and his wife. Then I think they bought up their whole block in Palo Alto, right? Just paid their neighbors over and above market rates, for their houses, which they then leveled, and now have created a private school. And I'm sure underneath there have a bunker. And I know they've got the big land in Kauai, and I'm sure there's a bunker under there. But yeah, there's a whole cottage industry where these companies will build these tricked out, their own oxygen, own air supply system, air filtration system, I should say, own power system, etc. Because they're figuring either the collapse of civilization or the zombie apocalypse or something. And I'm pretty certain they're also trying to hedge. And I say they, I mean the tech bros and the 1% of the 1% of the 1% are trying to hedge their bet immortality tip, right? So I'm sure they're also
Right.
investing in cryogenics and looking to get their bodies frozen and then come back after we've all eaten each other in the great zombie jamboree.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The Great Zombie Jamboree is so good. And that's a good question.
Oh,
I want to flip it to you, Kevin, about your setting.
Sure.
Because, The Longest Death evokes this like 50s noir version of small town America,
Mhm.
diners, defenses, and strict social codes. As a Canadian, what drew you to this setting?
Well, I mean, as it just goes back to my love for these novels and films. Like, I just wanted to create a story in that world. But more specifically about Riverton is that it is a made up place. It is a place that, um, sure, I think anyone reading the novel who's familiar with the genre, they would be able to construct their version of Riverton in their mind, in their imagination. But that was very purposeful, because the novel for me is sort of again about this idea of a heist and its outcome, and these two characters in particular, Richard and Marlon, chasing something that's that's out of their reach. It's complete. It's always just out of their grasp. It's a dream. It's an illusion, and I wanted Riverton, and as I call it in the novel, the big city, which I don't name in particular as like their destination, which again is not defined. I wanted them both to be ephemeral in some degree because I didn't want the readers to get rooted in. Well, this wasn't how like Boston was in 19,
mhm.
43 or whatever. I wanted them to sort of feel what Richard and Marlon were feeling, that that they're on this journey with them and experiencing this chase for something, that Richard and Marlon believe is going to happen. That they will get this money, that they will move away, and they will live this incredible life together. And I wanted the reader to feel that as well, however that journey takes up and down to the end. So yeah, I wanted to draw on the traditions of noir, but I didn't want to make it too. I didn't want to make a real specificity in the place. Conversely, I'm working on my next book, which is set in New York City in the '60s, and I have to say, I wish someone would have told me how much research was involved because I'm having to do some digging. I gotta tell you that, but it's enjoyable. I'll say that. Yeah.
Gary's like, I could have told you.
That's right.
That's great. We have some questions in here. But first, I think, because it pertains to the questions that I'm seeing, I think it's worth mentioning that you both have quite extensive background in film and TV. And if you can, each of you, could you just kind of speak to what your background, what role that plays in like your writing process and being a novelist?
Um, well, I'll just say for me, real quick, um, I write I write comics, and I've had a few forays or a couple of forays into television work, and of course, writing a script is much different than writing a prose. In fact, I just had the lovely occasion to take one of my short stories, a prose short story, and adapt it into a comics script. And I was conscripted by the length I could make this script. So I guess I would just say, for me, writing in all those different those forms does help you to think uh, at times in an abbreviated way. Uh, but I also like to think a la Elmore Leonard, I try to think about how does my dialogue uh, illuminate character, and without being particularly, hopefully not too obvious and not too expository, can my dialogue help move the plot along?
Mm. Yeah, I would say for me, yeah, my background is a lot of film criticism, a lot of like pop culture sort of journalism, and I do freelance sort of script coverage, which is just reading film scripts and then providing like summaries
Mm-hmm.
and short
Mm-hmm.
feedback and things like that. But I would say, like, in terms of practice and process, it's just made me not afraid of the blank page. Like, I don't have that because I've so often had to work on like insane deadlines, just like putting stuff together that, when I'm working on a project like I am now, I'm able to just get up and write. And I don't have that sort of writer's block or freezing or whatever. I just am able to just sit down, do what I want to do for the day in terms of where I want to work, like what I want to work on the story on that day, and know that I'll eventually have to go back and do what needs to be done. But I don't have that fear of sitting at a keyboard and not knowing what to type.
That's great. It seems like there's a lot to be said for that. It's a good skill. We're
Mhm.
going to get into some questions that everybody had. Martin asks, for Kevin, could you see your book more of a limited TV series rather than a film adaptation? It feels like there's so much room for exploration of Riverton and its people and even the gun shop.
Yeah, there is a sequence in a gun shop, which is like that. Oh, that's a good point. It's the only time the story kind of goes outside Riverton. Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe I'll hire Gary to do the script. I don't know. See how much time he's got. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it does lend it. I'm not blind to the fact that it is a very sort of. It's written in a certain sort of cinematic way. I don't know if I would personally want to be involved in an adaptation if,
Mm-hmm.
God willing, that would happen. Because I've sat with it for like 3 years. I'm kind of, if someone has their right take on it, they can run with it, and as long as I get my royalty checks in the mail, then that's fine by me. Yeah, yeah. So I would say either or. Don't have a preference, but there is, to Martin's question, there. I think Riverton does offer a lot to sort of build out if someone were to choose to do that.
So we're going to continue talking about movies. Paul says, wondering which movies reflect your genres best from your perspectives. I'm wondering if we meant reflect your novels, maybe, or sort of like the world that you're writing in.
Mm.
Are there any movies that exist that you feel maybe are in conversation or an extension of the books that you've written?
Well, I'll just say, yeah, I can't really think of a movie set in 60s LA or movies, made in 60s LA that, well, that's not quite true. I can think of a couple movies that certainly made in the late 60s and maybe into the 70s that I guess reflected to a certain extent. I mean, in fact, funny enough, I'll tell you one, which was the Split, which is actually based
Mm.
on one of the Parker novels. The novel's called The Seventh, and in fact, this, by the way, I cite this novel as one of the inspirations for my novel because it's about Parker, or in this case, it's I think they rename him McLean. It's Jim Brown. Jim Brown plays the character in the movie, and they rob the Coliseum, which is our one of our pro football stadiums here or college and pro football stadiums here in LA. And they rob it during a game, and that's based in the novel. They rob it during a college game, but they make it a pro game. The Rams are playing, and Jim Brown puts together a team where it includes Ernest Borgnine, Warren Oates, and those and Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman. Speaking of crooked cops, Gene Hackman is the crooked cop who comes in he's the seventh. He sort of horns in to try to get their money that the thieves have stolen. So yeah, that's kind of an example. That's an example, I suppose, of something that's in this genre, set very specifically in the time period of then, and it kind of gives you a sideways glance of L.A. then. And then sort of real quick, and there's another one with Gene Hackman, again playing a crooked cop, or he's a crooked DEA agent. It's called Cisco Pike, which was with Chris Christopherson, and set in 1970s Venice, California.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've talked about a couple of them already. So They Live by Night, for sure. Again, it's sort of a love story and crime story together, that just work beautifully in tandem. The Maltese Falcon, again, this sort of idea of chasing a dream, chasing something that where its perceived value is maybe not its actual thing. And I would just want to shout out, there's a 1954 film, Crime Wave, by Andre Toth with Sterling Hayden, that is really underrated and I think
Yes,
absolutely phenomenal. It is hard as hell. And the
that's
thing I
right.
really like about it is it really sits in the setting. Like you really get a sense of the
Hmm.
city that it's working around. There's Just to give an example, there's one scene where just two cops go into a bar looking for somebody, and the bar is like really dingy, and there's just a bunch of barflies like lined up, and the camera just kind of lingers on them, and then pulls out and goes to the next scene. It has that kind of. That's what I aim to try and do in my novels, is to sort of have this, to sort of get that tactile sense of setting. And that film, yeah, everyone go figure out how to watch Crime Wave. It rules. So
That,
yeah, those three
that's
for
great.
sure. Yeah.
That's great. By the way, I believe it was Charles Bronson's first film, and not for nothing, Sterling Hayden is the cop, right?
Yeah.
Is the cop in
Yeah.
that, and it's set Southland, and I think Hayden was like, I don't know, 6'4", 6'5". He was a big dude already, and they purposely then would bring the ceiling in and crowd the door frames in to make him even look more imposing.
Yeah. I mean, he walks around that movie like a monster, you know? It's
Yes,
wild.
yes, it's great. That's a great movie.
I love getting these recommendations. Thanks for this question.
Of these obscure flicks, exactly. Yeah.
My list just grows and grows and grows. Thank you both so much for sharing your afternoons with us. We really appreciated it. Do you have anything that is in the works right now that you want to talk about to sort of like end cap this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it. I'm working on my next novel. All I'll say is that it's a crime story set in the 60s. Um, yeah, so I'm pounding away at that, and go read Gary's book because I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I'll say the same. I'm enjoying your book, and I'll just say that the third uh, Harry Ingram novel, the crime photographer, is, well, it's not exactly in the can. I mean, it's a draft is done, and my wonderful editor at Soho, Alexa, and I are sort of going through some rewrites and such, which I always find painful, but very rewarding in the end. And so this book, I believe the title, I think we've settled on the title, is going to be called The Devil's Left
Nice.
That's so great.
Eye.
Well, I'm gonna announce our gift card winners. I didn't say this at the beginning, but of course, if you're interested in purchasing either of these books, we ask you so kindly to do so through Mystery to Me. This helps keeps the series going, and it supports a local bookseller that's really doing the work. So there's a little green button there at the bottom of your screen. If you have won a gift card, we will email you with information on how to redeem that. And our $25 gift card is going to Chuck Brownman. Chuck,
Mm.
congratulations.
I
Our
know Chuck.
$50 gift card is going to Heidi Chapson.
Hmm.
Heidi, thanks for tuning in. And our $75 gift card is going to Charles Ships. So thank you all for tuning in. We're so happy to have you. Gary and Kevin, thank you again. Congratulations to both of you. An early congratulations, Kevin. I
Thank
guess.
you. Thanks, Lily, for walking us through some tech stuff and moderating.
No,
Yes.
of course.
As I was lost in the tech wilderness. My goodness. Gee whiz.
Thanks for not jumping ship on me. Nobody wants that. So thank you guys both. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you beginning of September for Jasper Ford.
All right, y'all.
Have a great day.